The SA Tomorrow Investor Conference has kicked off in New York. The gathering will feature prominent speakers and panellists from the private and public sectors to discuss various topics of interest to the US investor base.
Now here's Sherwin Bryce-Pease with more.
You join us here at the main plenary venue of the 10th Annual South Africa Tomorrow Investor Conference, sponsored by the likes of Standard Bank, Old Mutual, UBS and the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And some of the key focus areas here will be on logistical deficits, on infrastructure deficits in South Africa, under the theme Progress in Solving South Africa's Infrastructure Constraints. One of the key stakeholders, one of the key interlocutors here is none other than the CEO of the Standard Bank Group, Tshabalala. Mr. CEO, a very warm welcome back to SABC News. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Sherwin, and it's Sim, not Mr. CEO.
You got me there. You got me there. Sim, yeah. This is billed as an event that seeks to engage with US investors in promoting South Africa as an attractive investment destination. You represent the private sector. I wonder what is the value proposition you will be presenting to your audience here over the next 2 days?
Sure, and the value proposition is that firstly, South Africa is a country that has got exceptionally great competitive advantages. Firstly, it's got great institutions. The National Treasury is ranked second in the world for budget transparency after Georgia. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. And it's been number 2 consistently after New Zealand for over 10 years. Secondly, the central bank governor, Mr. Kganyago, is ranked A-. He's one of the top 20 governors in the world. And so I'm taking advantage of the spirit of the rugby to say that we are champions and we should recognize that as South Africans. Thirdly, we've got a great corporate sector. The companies represented here today are incredible. They represent the best in their industries globally. The next point to take account of is the fact that we've got the rule of law. Again, amongst the best in the world, amongst the best constitutions in the world, the South African Constitution. I could go on for much longer. The point of the matter is the value proposition for South Africa is that we've got great competitive advantages. Investors can invest and be fairly rewarded for the risks that they take in being invested in South Africa.
So, Sim, you mentioned the Springboks. We saw President Ramaphosa seeking to leverage this victory and potential success of the Proteas in India as a springboard of hope for some of the challenges we continue to grapple with. Low growth trajectory, limited fiscal space, growing debt burden, unemployment, load shedding, logistics constraints, infrastructure deficits, geopolitical dynamics, right?
Yes.
How well don't we know that after the Lady R debacle in South Africa? What's your reading of these impediments and how they land in the conversations you'll have here?
The impediments are being addressed, and they're being addressed in partnership between the government, organs of civil society and business. There are 3 major themes on which we are in partnership, and we'll be speaking about those here. On energy, we are very focused as South Africans to address the energy deficit, and we think we'll be solving it in the next 18 months. On logistics, we will be speeding up the ability of South Africans to get their goods to the ports and to be able to sell them internationally. There are steps being taken by the partners to get us there. On crime, lots of focus on crime and corruption to help us make it easier for us to buy and sell our goods, to do so in peace, to meet our contractual obligations as they fall due, and to make sure that there is no theft. So the story that is being told about the investment proposition in relation to South Africa is a good one. I could also address the geopolitical issues if you want me to, but perhaps let me stop there.
Well, go ahead, right? I mean, South Africa's foreign policy is part of this conversation, is it not? Particularly when, capital investors are saying, I want my money to go there as opposed to there. I mean, how big a factor is that in the conversations you have here?
It's a big factor, but South Africa's position is very clear, and we support it as Standard Bank. And the position really is simply this. South Africa abides by global norms, as summarized in the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, as well as the Africa Union policy on people and human rights. We believe firmly in peace as a nation, and we also believe that those warring nations need to abide by global standards and by global norms. That is the position of South Africa. It's been the position of South Africa since 1994, and we're supportive of it. South Africa adopts what people are calling strategic non-alignment, which means South Africa will do what is in the best interest of South Africa. It'll take no sides and will do what is right for South Africa. The American authorities understand this. and global authorities understand this too. And so that is a rational position to take. That's what we tell investors, and investors understand it. It's so similar and it's no different to the position of France, to the position of South Korea, and indeed to the position of Argentina. Why not South Africa?
You told a competitor in August that South Africa was quickly losing its competitive advantage over the rest of Africa, with its risk premium deterring investment and making it harder to raise capital to stimulate economic growth. I put it to you then, what's the case to be made to these investors given what you have laid out yourself?
There is now momentum in dealing with the structural reforms necessary for South Africa to become more competitive. The best example, of course, is the list of activities as summarized in the latest report on Operation Vulindlela, on visas, on the electricity deficit we're speaking about, on logistics, on the water sector, on tourism. And so my point to you is, since we spoke, there's great momentum, and long may it last.
Are there specific asks, right? You've mentioned some of the sectors that need help here. What are you presenting? This is a hole that we need to come and plug? This is a state-owned enterprise that needs perhaps to be privatized or unbundled? I mean, are those the types of conversations you're having?
The conversations we're having are similar to what you and I have just had, except to say that we are arguing for orthodoxy. We're arguing for world best practice. We're arguing for the need for South Africa to become more competitive, make it easier to do business, identify opportunities to work closer with civil society, work closer with the labor movement to make it easier for South Africa to compete. And I'm delighted to say that those conversations are happening, and I'm also delighted to say that they are showing progress. As illustrated, for example, by the medium-term budget speech that was issued by the Minister of Finance yesterday.
The little I know about investors is that they like predictability, and we are, of course, heading into a very unpredictable time in South Africa, particularly around the election next year. The political landscape is part of the discussions that I see on the program here. What's your reading of the political landscape and where we go from here? Because there is uncertainty now, isn't there not?
There is certainty, however, that South Africa is a constitutional democracy that works, that we've got competitive political parties, that they are competing for the attention of voters on the basis of policies that they're going to implement, and for God's sake, long may that last.
When investors bring money into a country, they often do that at the local level, right? They build a factory or they build a big company, and it's at the municipal level. What's your reading of the trajectory we're on in terms of correcting local government, the deficits we see in terms of infrastructure at that local level, in terms that impact service delivery, tarred roads, piped water, contaminated dams? Are you satisfied that at the local level issues are being addressed competently? Because there's been a huge skills deficit at that level, has there not been?
Sadly, the proposition in your question I have to agree with, that there's a dire need for the professionalization of local government, for the eradication of corruption, for the diminution of theft, and the urgent need for the hiring of engineers so that we sort out sewage reticulation, to make sure that the water flows, to make sure that services are delivered appropriately. Your question is 100% correct. Not enough has happened and more needs to be done. But I have to say that I've heard politicians start to talk about the urgent need to professionalize the civil service, and in particular at local government.
Final question for you. What does success look like at the end of these 2 days?
Success looks like perhaps a rallying of South African bonds, an improvement in the prices on the JSE, and a narrowing of credit default swaps for South Africa. I'm a finance person. That is how I would look at it, to say, well, have investors heard, and have investors put their money where their mouths are. Tshabalala, a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much indeed. Delighted. Thank you very much, Sherwin.
The Chief Executive of the Standard Bank Group in conversation with us here to preview the South Africa Tomorrow Investor Conference. I can tell you some of the key interlocutors here will be the Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, Enoch Godongwana, the Finance Minister, Reserve Bank Governor Lesetja Kganyago, and of course the Minister in the Presidency, Minister Ramakgopa, of course also here to engage with investors. Let's hand it back to you now in studio.